Does the president have a particular opinion about this trucker action going on in Canada right now? Because it is affecting not only Ottawa, but obviously some of these border crossings. And could it possibly have some impact on the U.S. economy?
Yeah.
In the long run, if it continues.
So we are watching this very closely, because, as you kind of touched on here, the Ambassador Bridge is Canada's busiest link to the United States and accounts for about 25% of trade between the two countries. And so the blockade poses a risk to supply chains for the auto industry because the bridge is a key conduit for motor vehicles, components and parts, and delays risk disrupting auto production. We are in close contact. We've been doing a great deal of work on this. Liz Sherwood-Randall, our Homeland Security Advisor, convened a meeting just today. We're in very close contact and coordination with the Custom and Border Protection Team and Canadian counterparts, Michigan Governor Whitmer, and industry stakeholders. We are also monitoring very closely and engaged with auto companies on what the impacts could be of auto parts, which is what would come from Canada, and the impact on the United States. We're also tracking potential disruptions to U.S. agricultural exports from Michigan into Canada.
Shares of CVS sank on Wednesday after the drugstore operator reiterated rather than raise its earnings forecast for this year, despite posting profit that beat expectations. CVS Health benefited from higher demand for COVID-19 vaccines and at-home tests due to the Omicron variant. It administered more than 20 million vaccines across the U.S. during the quarter, a significant jump from the previous quarter. CVS made around $4 billion in extra revenue from providing vaccines and tests in 2021, but has warned that demand for them will wane this year. The company's CFO said on the earnings call that the retailer expects to administer 70 to 80% fewer vaccines in 2022 and 40 to 50% fewer tests. So it maintained its earlier forecast for adjusted earnings in 2022, which was lower than what analysts expected.
Don't expect any bargains on Evergrande apartments. That is the message from the troubled Chinese property giant. A Reuters source says Chairman Hui Kai-yan set out a revival plan to staff over the weekend. He reportedly set a goal of delivering 600,000 apartments this year, and said there would be no fire sales in a bid to shift stock. Instead, Hui wants Evergrande to clear its debt by getting construction and sales activities back to normal. The world's most indebted developer has been tottering under more than $300 billion in liabilities. It's been struggling to pay creditors and suppliers, raising fears of a messy collapse that would ripple through financial markets. Hui says Evergrande has almost $8 billion in escrow accounts to pay for construction, and more than 3 times that amount yet to be collected from sales. He says the company can get out of the woods if work resumes at full tilt.
Turkish construction worker Ezat Selik is struggling to meet the needs of his 3 children and cover the cost of his apartment in Istanbul. Inflation's leapt to near 50% in the country after a currency crash sparked by President Tayyip Erdogan's unorthodox low interest rates policy. Like many Turks, the 32-year-old and his young family are grappling with the surge in the cost of living.
We feel it. I have 3 kids and I'm having a hard time meeting the needs of my children. I bought a house and took out a loan, and I'm having difficulty in paying the installments. I'm in distress because I need to feed and care for my kids.
Selik and his wife have cut back their own diets in order to feed their children. He says diapers and baby formula for his newborn son cost twice as much as last year. As the family breadwinner, he's also struggling to find work. They've had to seek help from a crowdsourced aid initiative initially set up by the city municipality for families hit by coronavirus lockdowns. Selik submits his utility bills, which have doubled in the last year, to the scheme for payment. The government says credit, exports and investment will help the country weather inflation. Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu said applications to the municipality-led support scheme were double the rate last year, more than 30,000 requests for help in the first 3 weeks of 2022. Energy is also more expensive. Electricity prices have been raised as much as 125% for high-demand commercial users and by around 50% for lower-demand households.
Stocks jumped on Wednesday, closing sharply higher as mega-cap growth stocks like chipmaker Nvidia and tech giant Microsoft powered up, thanks to a pause in rising interest rates. The Dow finished up close to 1%, while the S&P 500 rose 1.5%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq closed up 2% higher, potentially easing some pressure on technology shares. Payne Capital Management's president, Ryan Payne, said it's upbeat earnings that are encouraging investors to buy.
Things got a little bit oversold, right? We had a big sell-off in the beginning of the year with the readjustment with the Fed and interest rates. We know they're going higher. But let's face it, this past quarter, earnings look good. You have 76% of companies beating on the top and bottom line. And at the end of the day, the stock market's a slave to earnings, and earnings look pretty good. And if you start looking at guidance as well, going into next quarter, you're seeing the same thing. So it looks like earnings are strong. The economy should be strong again this year. And you're starting to see a big bounce in the market because there's a lot of cash out there and there's a lot of opportunity to buy stocks.
Shares of Chipotle surged after beating profit and sales estimates, while KFC and Taco Bell parent Yum Brands also rose after reporting sales that beat expectations. Enphase Energy jumped on upbeat results, lifting other solar stocks like SunPower and Solar Edge Technologies. But CVS slipped after its earnings forecast for 2022 fell short of Wall Street expectations. And after 4 straight days of deep declines, shares of Meta Platforms rose 5%, bouncing back slightly after losing almost a third of the stock's value.